I'm Carol Carman, and on behalf of Dennis of Grunty Fen.co.uk, I'd like to welcome you to this Grunty Fen podcast. Later on, there's a free episode for you to enjoy in celebration of the fact that Mr. South has finally put pen to paper and written a new book called The Authorised Guide to Grunty Fen. Illustrated by John Holder, this volume is a must for all fanatics, featuring, as it does, sections on the history of Grunty Fen, its people, currency exchange rates, shopping, nightlife and health risks. I went to visit Mr. South at his home, and by the fire in his library I asked him why he decided to finally write this book.
Well, quite frankly, I didn't. I mean, it's kind of you to inquire, but I didn't decide. People like, it was women. Let's be frank about it. It was women who nagged and bullied me into it. I'd resisted the idea of writing a guidebook to Grunty Fen for, at least 10 years, maybe more. And in the end, I gave in for the sake of a quiet life. And I can remember sitting down beside a great heap of A4 with a sharpened ballpoint pen and just sitting there. And I just couldn't do it. There was always an excuse not to write the blinking thing. You know, something needed doing in the garden, or some potatoes needed peeling, or something unimportant like that. I just put it off and put it off. And you can believe this or you can believe it not. I don't really care, but I'm going to tell you the absolute truth of how I got started on writing this book that women had been chivying and bullying me into for years and years and years. Miss Edwards was the worst by far. In the end, in order to get away from the whole problem, I went on a long holiday. Now, I repeat, you can believe this or you can believe it not. I really don't care, but this is the truth. I went on a very long journey to the southwest of China. Well, after all, this guidebook to Grunty Fen is called Gateway to the East, so why not go as far east as possible, having left Grunty Fen? So that's what I did. And I went to the state of Yunnan, in the extreme southwest of China, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas, and is... well, it's Tibet. Geographically, it's Tibet. And I was in... you're not going to believe this, but it is true. I was in a little village in the foothills of the Himalayas, a Tibetan village, in a lovely little cranky hotel. And I sat down in that wooden bedroom. It was wooden walls, wooden ceiling. Everything was wooden, looking out at the mountains. And I thought, I'm far enough away from Grunty Fen at last to see it objectively. Because you have to understand, dear listener, that if you are in Grunty Fen, it is so, it's so overwhelmingly awful that you can't really see it objectively. But as you move away from it, this curious thing happens, and inexplicably, you become fond of it. You become fond of a place that, when you are actually in it, you deplored. So there I was, in this Tibetan village. You're not going to believe this. I know you're not. I was in this Tibetan village, and I made friends. My wife and I chummed up with a Tibetan farmer and his wife and his son, and they invited us into the farmhouse. And as we were crossing the farmyard, we had to step with great difficulty from side to side to avoid the yak droppings. I knew you wouldn't believe it, but this is true. So there I was, picking a course, very cautiously, across this Tibetan farmyard towards the farmhouse, trying to pick a way through the yak droppings. And into my mind came the thought, it was so much easier in Grunty Fen. Well, do you see what I'm driving at? That getting from A to B in Grunty Fen is a bit of an obstacle course, because there are these puddles, which, and this is not true of any other puddle on earth, the puddles in Grunty Fen are deeper at the edges than they are in the middle. So you cannot sensibly just step cautiously into the edge of a puddle in Grunty Fen, because you will find that you're 9 inches or knee deep in mud. And there are all sorts of other things. There are droppings, there are animal droppings in Grunty Fen, which I do not wish to explore further at this moment. So crossing a farmyard among yak droppings in Yunnan in a Tibetan farmhouse was a pushover compared with Grunty Fen. And this is what happened. I settled down at the hotel and I started to write the guidebook to Grunty Fen. As a result, you now have before you a guidebook which is fond. It likes Grunty Fen with gritted teeth. It likes Grunty Fen. It's anxious that strangers venturing into Grunty Fen should like it. And that's very odd, because whenever I'm actually there, I can't abide the place. I mean, the people are so... Well, they're not rude, but they're difficult. They never say what you expect them to say. They're so contrary. They take the opposite view on anything you want to talk about. And yet they've got so much to be proud of, but they're not proud of the things that they ought to be proud of. I mean, Grunty Fen people ought to be proud of the fact that they've managed to survive the green flux. That's a terrible disease. You may not have heard of it, but it's passed down through generations of people die from the green flux. It's incurable, but it only turns out... no, I won't. The symptoms are... Never mind. They have survived the green flux, according to record, for 300 or 400 years. They have survived without actually really working. I mean, very, very few people do what you would call a job. And certainly none of it turns up in national statistics. That's something to be proud of in a way. I mean, perversely, it's an achievement. But they're not proud of all these things they've done. They're proud of getting away with it, I suppose. They're proud of the village hall. Have you ever seen Grunty Fen Village Hall? How could anybody be proud of that dilapidated, tottering heap of sticks? Beats me. I don't know why they... Oh, I do feel so at odds. I didn't feel like this when I was in Yunnan. When I was in Yunnan and writing the guidebook, and I wrote a bit more on another holiday, I should think I wrote about 1/3 of it in China, and about another third... We were on a trip to the Cape Verde Islands. It's stuck out there off the coast of Africa, in the middle of the Atlantic. And, oh goodness, the journey there was so boring that I started writing again. So that was to be sort of rounded off. I suppose I wrote 1/3 of it in China, 1/3 of it going to the Cape Verde Islands. And you might ask, if you care, where did I write the other 1/3? And I haven't got a clue. I think I must have been drunk or something. I tell you one thing. If you read this book with any close attention, you will find that if you get seriously bored, I mean, I don't doubt you'll be bored most of the time, but if you get seriously bored, then it's the bits I didn't write in China or the Cape Verde Islands. The bits when I was so close to Grunty Fen back home that it started to get a grip of me. And that great miasmic cuddle of squalid vapours and mud and bickering and belief in the totally ridiculous things like a rhubarb factory, all those things which, no normal person could possibly believe. They start... Oh dear. I sometimes wonder for my own sanity, seriously. Because I've lived with Grunty Fen for 17, 18, nearly 30 years. 3 decades. Grunty Fen has been part of my life. meeting Dennis. I must tell you a little later how I came to meet Dennis. But meeting Dennis almost weekly, 17 years, interviewing him about life at Grunty Fen, very reluctantly at first, and how he got into my soul, if you believe in the existence of a soul. I think I started to go mad. I seriously think I got a bit loopy. I started to believe things I was told by people at Grunty Fen that were preposterous. I mean, who ever heard of a cottage hospital that rented itself out for weekend breaks to people, and that the ambulance was used for carrying people on seaside holidays or weddings, was never used for carrying the halt or the lame? I mean, who would believe it? Who would believe, continuing the medical part of it, who would believe that there was a doctor, a general practitioner in the village, frequently consulted by local people, not because he knew anything about medicine, although he did. Doc Wallace was reasonably well qualified. He'd been in the Navy for some time, and he knew things about, well, never mind, we'll gloss that over. But he knew quite a bit about the way people could behave. But people didn't go to the surgery to talk to Dr. Wallace. They went to talk to his parrot. I'm not sure it was a parrot. I always thought it was a macaw, but everybody called it a parrot. Anyway, this parrot was trained in medicine, if you like, and the local people believed that what the parrot said was sensible. So somebody would come in and talk about their ankle or their elbow or their whatever, and the parrot would say, "It's me nerves, doctor," or "That's a big un." I'm sorry, I know this is ridiculous. And the people would believe what the parrot said rather than the doctor. Now, this is just an example of how I began to believe this nonsense, because so many people told me, including the doctor, as a matter of fact. I didn't interview the parrot. Well, he would have said, "That's a big one, I suppose." Anyway, this is the way Grunty Fen drew me in. And I somehow had to release myself from the... I've just thought of the stink pipe. I'm sorry, this is not an obscene conversation, but, you know, this is the way my head works. I cannot get away from Grunty Fen. You know that of the bill, and this is all in the guidebook, so you can read it. If it's in the guidebook, it must be true, mustn't it? The tallest building in Grunty Fen, this comes in the architecture section of the guidebook, is the stink pipe behind the gents at the Bull Pub. It's taller than the tower of the parish church because the tower has subsided by several feet, quite recently, as a matter of fact. So the stink pipe is the tallest building in Grunty Fen, and it is used, apart from anything else, well, its main use is obvious, isn't it? It's used for hanging bunting from at, coronations, jubilees and that sort. There's little bits of tatty bunting hanging at the top. Oh, goodness, and underneath is the gents. You see, this is how Grunty Fen traps you. You begin to believe that the totally preposterous is true. Do you know where the Grunty Fen Boy Scouts troop meet? In the gents, under the stink pipe, at the Bull. I know, it's ridiculous, because they were kicked out of the village hall for having a campfire in the hall. It would be a jolly good thing if they'd burned the hall down. But anyway, you don't believe me. All right, suits you. But if you read this guidebook, you will begin to believe these things are true, as I have. And the awful thought is, maybe they are. Maybe all these things I've been told, like the Guy Fawkes night bonfire, on which they burn vats of industrial mayonnaise and old tyres, really do generate a smoke which has a therapeutic quality which attracts people from far and wide, people with asthmatic and bronchial disorders stand downwind of the bonfire in order to heal themselves of their disorders. You begin to believe all this. And who is to say that you're wrong? I mean, it's all so convincing. I mean, if you manage to read the new guidebook and come out of it still confident that you are a sane, sensible person, then you're a better person than I am. Truly. I mean, I wrote it, and I think I believe it, because I was told it, on good evidence. I'm off to Yunnan now, because I'm really feeling very, very confused, and it's only when I go a long way from Grunty Fen. And believe you me, Calais is not far enough. Warsaw, forget it. Calcutta, still close to home. You need to go the other side of the Himalayas. You need to go to a little village in Tibet. And then you feel all right again. I'll see you there.
That's Christopher South speaking to me at his home about how foreign travel had enabled him to write what's been needed for years, The Authorised Guide to Grunty Fen. And with foreign travel in mind, let's hear that free episode of Dennis of Grunty Fen that I promised you. Let me take you back to August 2003, when Dennis was looking forward to his own summer holiday.
Faint tigers got dewdrops on their nose. Faint tigers got whips in their toes. Faint tigers got teal and grotto point. But blast that wind come off the fin, that'll blow you there and back again. Blast that wind come off the fin, blow you off your boy.
Thank you, Dennis. And let's get
Ahoy
straight
there,
Yes, quite. Let's pick up from where we were.
Ahoy there, me hearty.
Yes, indeed. Ahoy there, my hearty. As I was saying, let's pick up from where we left off last week. Now, you were saying
that worked up, you know, my Maudie.
But as I told you last week, Dennis, you can't go on a holiday abroad without a passport.
And as I told you last week, that's just where you're wrong.
No, Dennis, no, I'm not. I mean, if you're thinking of travelling beyond the European Union, you and Miss Deeks will face an absolute... What did you say?
Cruising.
Cruising?
See, that's where you get on a boat and it
Yes.
take you abroad.
Yeah, I know what a cruise is, Dennis, but...
Don't need a passport for that, you know.
But I mean...
Not so long as you don't disembark.
Not so long as you don't... But Dennis,
You can circumcise the world without getting off, you know.
Circumnavigate, I think is right. Look, even if you were right, which you're not, what would be the point of going to, well, the coast of China or India or Africa without landing? I mean, the whole point of travelling is
You can wave to the natives when they come out in these little old canoes selling calabashes and that, can't you?
Look, Dennis, why not simply apply for a passport? Eh? Why not get a passport if you're really serious
Be
about
all right for Maudie. She's got the wherewithal and that.
What do you mean the wherewithal?
The papers. They've never really found out that night.
I see what you're driving at now. Yes.
Well, I thought I'd found it once.
Yes, your birth certificate.
In the peat frame.
Yes, the old biscuit tin in which your grandmother keeps the family archive, yes.
Only that...
And your birth certificate turned out to be a kennel club registration for a dog.
Dodger.
Yes, Dodger. Even your old dog was better known to the civil service than you are. So how have you managed to pass through life without even so much as brushing with authority? I'll tell you one thing, it's going to make it rather difficult to get a passport. I mean, that's for sure, I grant you that.
I suppose I could apply for a passport in the name of Dodger.
No, not really, Dennis, really. The passport office seldom issues papers to dead dogs.
The foreigners wouldn't know.
Yes, but...
Think of the funny names what they got. A bloke on the news the other day called Banana.
Dennis, you're
Well, if he
English.
can get away with it...
Dennis, are you seriously proposing to travel round the world without setting foot on land?
Not necessarily.
But without a passport...
Well, they can't have 'em all the way round, can they?
What?
There's bound to be gaps.
Gaps in what?
Well, if we got the captain to sort of sail close to the coast, we could asked for the loan of his skiff. Spot a gap in that, see?
Look, Dennis, I'm sorry, but this...
Well, you take Squire Livesey and Captain Trelawney.
Squire Livesey and...
They never had to show their passports when they landed on Treasure Island, did they?
Dennis...
Like I say, they spotted a gap.
Dennis, this gap you keep mentioning...
In the guards.
The guards.
They're coast guards. They can't have them shoulder to shoulder all round all the beaches in the world, can they? Talk sense.
Dennis.
They've got to be gaps.
Dennis, cruise ships do not call in at gaps.
Of course, we might have to pay the captain a bit extra for the use of his skiff, I
Really
suppose.
extra for the... And then you'd slip ashore on some deserted coast, you and Maudie, alone in some hostile, godforsaken place where...
Well, that'd only be till we went back to the boat.
Even so, Dennis.
Me and Maudie, we know it. Look after ourselves, you know.
Look, how would you survive on a far-flung
We've
coastline?
got a couple of tins of ambrosia creamed rice in her vanity case, missus. My Maudie.
Tinned rice.
Something to see us through till we find our feet and start living off the land. See? That'd be nice to get some fresh fruit, you know, some nice juicy popocata petals.
That's a volcano, Dennis.
Doc Wallace,
Oh,
you know.
yes, Doc Wallace. Yes, your general practitioner. He was a naval doctor.
He
wasn't
say if we do go ashore, we
Yes.
mustn't consort with no sailors, in fear of the Moby Dick, you say.
Fear of the...
See, one of the big dangers of cruising, missus.
Moby Dick. What? What dangers?
Know what that is?
Well, I don't know. No. What, I mean, some people say putting on weight when you're on a cruise because of the rich food that's served.
Scurvy.
Scurvy?
Well, that's apart from the Spanish.
The what?
Do a lot of marauding, the Spanish.
Dennis.
But me and Maudie will be all right.
Would you be safe from the marauding, you
She
think?
always pack a tube of fruit gums in her vanity case, you know.
To repel marauding Spaniards?
For the scurvy,
Oh, yes, of course, silly me. Yes, I didn't think...
Of course, I shall bang her biscuits out for her.
Maudie, you bang her...
Well, that wouldn't be ladylike having to bang out her own weevils, would it?
No,
And that ain't just the scurvy and the Spaniards you've got to look out for when you're cruising,
really,
you know.
Really? Oh, of course, there's the giant octopuses, I suppose, and the weevils and the mermaids.
And the corsairs.
Oh, yes, of course, the corsairs,
Well,
yes.
they ain't as bad as they used to be.
That's very true, Dennis. The corsairs are not as bad as they used to be. Most of the time, it's quite peaceful, modern cruising. Very little piracy, and as for scurvy... Look, most of the time, Dennis, all you've got to do is enjoy yourself on deck.
And that's
I mean,
another thing. When the captain shoots for all hands to go aloft, I shall be all right.
Aloft?
I'll be the one what's sitting on the bullocks, giving them a tune and
The
that. See?
what? The bullocks?
You ain't come across bullocks, missus? See, that's a nautical term, you know.
Bullocks?
That's spelt bulwarks.
Dennis.
But that's pronounced bullocks.
Dennis, it's bulwarks.
I'm sorry, missus, but see, forecastle, that's forecastle.
Yes.
Rowlocks, that's rowlocks.
Yes, that's right.
Boatswain, that's bosun.
bosun, yes.
And bulwarks, that's bullocks.
No, Dennis. It's really
Miss
not.
South, how many years have you spent before the mast?
For me? Well, I mean, I've had a certain amount.
Take it from me, that's bullocks.
Oh, all right. Have it your way. Incidentally, a moment ago, what was this you said about giving the crew a tune?
Well, when they're all up aloft and that.
Yeah, that's another thing. This
You
upper
see
loft...
me there, sitting on the bullocks, playing me banjo, you know.
Playing your banjo? Why?
Well, get out to go in the loft, that dude, innit?
Playing your banjo?
He says, did you ever see Victor Masterman in Corsairs of the Caribbean?
Some old film you saw as a boy?
Where he got out to pick an oakum by playing his whistle, you know.
No, I don't think I ever saw that.
But everything he done as long as he played his whistle while the rest of the mutineers was hard at it and that.
Really? And you propose to play your banjo
Well,
in
Victor
order to...
Masterman, they only had that little old whistle. Think what I could do with the banjo, missus.
Yeah,
Have the anchor up in no time, they will, with me giving
Dennis,
it.
your vision of a cruising holiday is somewhat... I mean, I scarcely know where to begin. I mean, for a start... Look, I fail to see how you could afford such a luxurious holiday, cruising. I mean, how are you going to pay for it? Pieces of 8?
Pieces of 8.
Doubloons?
Don't reckon me and Maudie could run to a piece of 8, missus.
Precisely. Precisely.
Don't they do small change? I mean,
small change.
pieces of 2 or pieces of 1.
Dennis.
What you want about doubloons?
Dennis, I was being ironical. Look, forgive me. I was
Trying to pay your way in trousers, wasn't it?
Trousers?
Well, where would I get them from in the first place? I mean, there's
Trousers?
not many what wear doubloons these days, is there?
Dennis, doubloons.
Willie Wood's got a very baggy pair of corduroys, but they ain't exactly what you'd call doubloons.
Dennis.
He wouldn't let me have them anyhow.
Dennis, have you thought about the social life on board a cruise ship? Eh? I mean, think of the etiquette, the demands on your wardrobe.
You're taking a blooming wardrobe with me, I can tell you that for a start. Anyway, the sea air'd lift the veneer. You'll be having me humping the parlour table and the chiffonier abroad next, you would.
No. I mean, you'd have to dress for dinner.
Dress for dinner?
Yes.
Well, of course I'd dress for dinner.
Well, then, there you
Expect
are.
me to eat in the nude, do you?
Have you got a dinner jacket?
Oh, what?
A dinner jacket. Have you got a dinner jacket?
A jacket specially for eating dinner. Well, you got one?
Oh, yes, of course I have. Yes.
What colour is it, then?
Black.
It's a bit gloomy, isn't it? Black.
Black.
Still, I suppose that hide the stains.
Well, that isn't the...
Do you have dinner trousers and all?
Look, Dennis,
Do you have breakfast trousers and supper trousers?
No. Dennis.
Do you have to nip out and change your trousers before you eat a bag of crisps? or
Dennis,
something,
unfortunately, we've run out of time. Or perhaps
because I'm an old fanboy, that don't mean I believe everything you tell me, you know.
Song, Dennis.
I ain't just old country boy.
Sing your song, please, Dennis.
That's all in your life, that's all in your life. Don't go scratching up your poor old head. Don't go worrying, just go back to bed. That's all in your life and you're a long time dead. That's all in your life. God bless. Telling me next you had to wear a pair of shorts for a snack or something like that, wasn't you?
Now you're being ridiculous.
Me?
Yes, you're just being
You're
ridiculous.
the ridiculous one. Dressing for dinner.
Banging a biscuit. Get the weevils out.
Thank you for listening to this podcast, brought to you by Grunty Fenery, keepers and purveyors of all things Dennis. If you'd like to know more about the world of Grunty Fen, please visit www.dennisofgruntyfen.co.uk, where you can also buy further episodes and memorabilia, including Mr. South's new book. If you have any comments on this podcast or suggestions for further topics for Mr. South to talk about, we'd welcome your emails. Please send them to dennis@dennisofgruntyfen.co.uk.